Hello, buddy. All right, so it looks like I need to fix some stuff on the email. Sorry, I'm late, guys. All right, man, that just shows you sometimes what happens when you kind of get too caught up in other things throughout the day. So, anyways, see if I can fix some of this stuff as well. What's going on here? Let's see. For all the latest in anime, cartoons. That wasn't what I was trying for. Let's see. Anyways, they're like, they really did a number on it this time, didn't they? Oh boy. All right, there we go. Oh, wait a minute. All right, that's what kind of threw me off. Sorry about that, guys. Let me kind of go back real quick here. Sorry about this. I'm gonna just leave the studio for a quick moment. Let me go ahead. Let me go ahead and put some music on while I'm gone here. All right, there we go. All right, sorry about that, guys. I think they must have been doing some change ups on the site or something like that, and that's why things didn't come into play as they normally did there. But anyways, I fixed it all now, so Well, again, welcome to the Mikestand. If you guys haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. Um, so, anyways, that goes for, of course, my Rumble and my YouTube viewers. Um, so, anyways, so here's what's on tap tonight. We'll just get right into talking about what's on tap for tonight. On tonight's episode of the Mikestand, of course, going to kind of do a follow up to what we did the other day. Of course, we did talk about the passing of lover boy Dennis Condrey of the Midnight Express. And in a rare move here, since we've been doing a lot of profile stuff, more with cartoons lately than anything else, I decided to focus in on some pro wrestling profiles, as it were. So what I decided to do today, especially considering how fast I had to make these decisions, I decided to go ahead and look back on the history of the Midnight Express, a tag team that was originally started by, of course, Dennis Condrey, Randy Rhodes, and Norville Austin, and of course, just going through some of their earlier incarnation, through the '80s at least. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that history, see how far we get up to. Maybe we get up to about the 40-minute mark. Then we'll, of course, get all caught up on all the latest in pro wrestling. And then we will of course, we will also go ahead and take a look back on this day in each history. So with all that being said, as we kind of got off to a rough start here, let's actually get into the material then. And just in case you guys have noticed, yes, I did shave my beard last night. So, all right, so as I said today, we're going to go ahead and focus in on the Midnight Express, the professional wrestling tag team. Of course, they were also, aside from some of their tag team finishers and just their work as tag teams. Of course, they always came out to the theme, the Midnight Express theme, done by Giorgio Moroder, I believe. But anyways, let's talk about this. We'll at least get through again the original incarnation and also the first maybe the second Cornette incarnation as well. Basically, we'll get from at least to the '80s portion of the Midnight Express's existence. So, without further ado, let's get into it. The Midnight Express was the name used by several professional wrestling tag teams of changing members, usually under the management of Jim Cornette, starting with Condrey and Eaton. The Midnight Express prior to that was well, they're about to say here. So the group started in 1980 with Dennis Condrey and Randy Rhodes in Southeast Championship Wrestling. In 1981, they were joined by Norville Austin. Who would actually go on to form a team with Coco Ware, the guy most WWF, WWE fans would know as Coco Beware, the Birdman. He has the Pretty Young Things in Florida, but that's another tale for another day. This group disbanded in 1983, but later the same year, a new version of the Midnight Express was formed in Mid-South Wrestling by teaming up Condrey and Bobby Eaton with Jim Cornette as their manager. I do need to go off camera here for another quick moment. I'll be right back, but I'll put some music on while I'm gone. All right, I'm back. Anyways, um, so let's get back to the article here. We're talking about the history of the Midnight Express. Let's see. All right. After leaving Mid-South, the Midnight Express competed briefly in WCCW, which is World Class Championship Wrestling. That was a Dallas-based territory. As mentioned the other day, of course, that was a territory that was owned by the Von Erich family. Before moving on to Jim Crockett Promotions, JCP, which, of course, would be the company that would eventually become WCW. Condrey left in 1987 and was replaced by Stan Lane. Eaton and Lane, in parentheses, still managed by Cornette, competed in JCP and WCW, where they briefly feuded with, in quotes here, the original Midnight Express of Condrey and Rose, managed by Paulie Dangerously, better known to modern fans as Paul Heyman. His managerial career goes back all the way back for almost 40 years. I think he started even before going to AWA in 1988. I think he even did some managing in ICW out of Jersey as well. So this version of the Midnight Express disbanded in October 1990 when Cornette and Lane left WCW. In 1998, the World Wrestling Federation teamed up Bob Holly, Bombastic Bob, and Bart Gunn, Bodacious Bart, as the Midnight Express, who were also managed by Jim Cornette. Of course, that was during the time when the WWE was trying to work through the whole NWA invasion angle bit. You know, how Jim Cornette would be bringing, talent from like NWA territories like Ohio Valley and Smoky Mountain, all that. Well, Ohio Valley it was Smoky Mountain at the time. Basically, the idea being how the NWA is just so much better than WWE at the time. So, from 2004 until 2011, various combinations of Condrey, and Eaton, and Lane competed as the Midnight Express on the independent circuit. So. And here's, of course, the box stable, of course, members. We don't need to go through every single name there because the Midnight Express Incorporated, original Midnight Express, Hometown, The Dark Side, debut 1980, disbanded in 2011. So, anyways, so the history of the Midnight Express. Okay, so 1980 to 1983, Condrey, Rose, and Austin here. In 1980, a new team was formed in Southeast Championship Wrestling, consisting of Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose. Norval Austin adopted the masked persona of the Shadow and teamed with Bob Armstrong to defeat Condrey and Rhodes for the title on May 4th, or teamed with Brad Armstrong of the famous Armstrong family. Basically, Brad is Road Dogg's older brother, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. But anyways, on May 4th, 1981, after losing the title back to Condrey and Rhodes on July 27th, 1981, Austin turned on Armstrong and joined up with Condrey and Rhodes to form a stable or a group known as the Midnight Express. In the book, The Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, the tag teams, Condrey explains that the name did not stem from the movie The Midnight Express. In parentheses, although later versions of The Midnight Express would use the film's theme by Giorgio Moroder, or a cover version, as their theme music. Yes, and that's what I alluded to earlier. That's the thing I do 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 do. Anyways, but from the fact that they all dressed in black, drove black cars, and were out partying past midnight. Together, the three men won the AWA Southern Tag title. That was when Southeast Championship Wrestling had started to also be affiliated with the. I believe that's when they started to do some work with AWA as well. In the CWA, actually, that's when they moved on to the CWA from Southeast Championship Wrestling and invoked the Freebird rule. That's when CWA was actually affiliated with the AWA. To allow any two of the three men to defend the titles on a given night. Basically, we talked about the Freebird rule the other day when we were talking about Condrey's passing. You know, albeit it was the Fabulous Freebirds themselves who popularized it. It was actually these three men who originated the idea. So. Anyways. And again, if you haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, as we continue on here, let's see. The Midnight Express lost the AWA Southern Tag Team title to Bobby Eaton and Sweet Brown Sugar. Before returning to Southeast Championship Wrestling in the spring of 1982. Upon their return in Southeastern Championship Wrestling, the Midnight Express quickly regained the Southeastern Tag Team title from Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden. Of course, the two cousins who would have several Southern regional tag titles throughout Tennessee and Alabama. You guys would probably remember them better as Colonel Rob Parker and Bunkhouse Buck in WCW fame in their later years. On September 27, 1982, the Express then became involved in a feud with the Mongolian Stomper and his storyline son, Mongolian Stomper Jr., with whom they traded the Southeastern title. The Midnight Express next challengers were Dizzy Ed Hogan and local wrestler Ken Lucas. Now, Dizzy Ed Hogan was actually the guy who would eventually become Brutus Beefcake. As you know, as Ed Leslie and Terry Bollier, aka Brutus Beefcake, and Hulk Hogan's friendship started when they were on the Southeast touring circuit prior to becoming big names in the world of professional wrestling. So Dizzy Ed Hogan was actually the guy who would eventually become Brutus Beefcake. The two teams repeatedly traded the title until Midnight Express, using their 3-on-2 advantage, finally reclaimed the championship by the end of July 1983. Midnight Express's final feud in the Southeastern Championship Wrestling was with the local heroes Jimmy Golden and Robert Fuller, who managed to drive the group out of SCCW after dropping the Southeast Championship Tag Team titles to Brad and Scott Armstrong, aka future WWE referee Scott James, again of the famous same family. Austin, Condrey, and Rhodes went their separate ways. Dennis Condrey and Bobby Eaton, 1983 to 1987. Let's see where we're at on time here. All right, 21 minutes, so not too bad. So this is the next stage of the Midnight Express tag team. So when Bobby Eaton was sent to Mid-South Wrestling under promoter Bill Watts as part of the talent trade, it was decided that he should be part of the new version of the Midnight Express. Eaton joined former rival Dennis Condrey under the management of Jim Cornette in this incarnation of the team. The Express had until this point been a group of wrestlers, but now worked exclusively as a two-man team. To complement lover boy Dennis Condrey, Eaton was nicknamed Beautiful Bobby, a nickname he continued using, of course, well into the early 90s. The Express was first booked in a storyline with Mid-South Tag Team Champions Magnum TA and Mr. Wrestling 2. The highlight of the angle saw Eaton and Orton tarring and feathering Magnum TA in the middle of the ring. Condrey and Eaton won their first Tag Team Championship when Mr. Wrestling 2 turned on Magnum TA and attacked him during a match, allowing the Midnight Express to walk away with the titles without much opposition. Collectively, Dennis Condrey and Bobby Eaton held 53 tag team titles, setting the record in all of professional wrestling during Midnight Express's times in Mid-South. Wendy Richter was made an honorary member by Jim Cornette. Well, now there's an interesting little... So the woman who'd go on to become WWF Women's World Champion was actually a member of the Midnight Express. Wow. Anyways, I do need to go off camera here for a moment. I'll be right back, but I will put some music on. Entertain you guys while I'm gone. And I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. Anyways, let's get back to the article here. Let's see. So, with Mr. Wrestling 2 and Magnum TA splitting up, the Midnight Express needed a new team to defend their newly won title against. This team was the Rock and Roll Express, Robert Gibson and Ricky Morton, with whom they started a long-running series of matches that would last well into the 90s and span several wrestling promotions. Probably one of the most legendary feuds in tag team wrestling of all time. The Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express. The two expresses had a series of matches which differed from the way tag team wrestling was presented at the time and drew attention both locally and nationally. The two teams feuded throughout 1984 in Mid-South before Midnight Express left the promotion to work elsewhere. The Midnight Express had a short stay in World Class Championship Wrestling in Texas, where they feuded mainly with the Fantastics, Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers. When opportunities in World Class Championship Wrestling looked to go nowhere, the Midnight Express signed with Jim Crockett Promotions in 1985, giving them national exposure through JCP's television shows that were broadcast on Superstation TBS. So, for many of you who grew up in the 80s and of course, the heyday of cable television, you probably remember turning on, TBS, whatever number it happened to be on your box, whatever. Here it was like 17, the Superstation, where it'd be 6:05 Eastern, 5:05 Central, and then I think 3:05 Pacific. But anyways, let's see. Shortly after joining JCP, the Midnight Express reignited their feud with the Rock and Roll Express, from whom they won the NWA World Tag Team titles in February 1986 on Superstars on the Superstation. Eaton and Condrey lost the titles back to the Rock and Roll Express 6 months later. Besides feuding with the Rock and Roll Express, Eaton and Condrey also had long-running feuds with the New Breed, Chris Champion and Sean Royal, as well as the Road Warriors, Animal and Hawk. The feud with the Road Warriors included a high-profile scaffold match at Starrcade 86, the Skywalkers, which the Midnight Express lost, where Jim Cornette famously hurt his knee when he fell off the scaffold. So you can make the argument. So a scaffold match, and I did explain this as well the other day. I'll just do it again real quick to give you guys an idea what a scaffold match is. Of course, a scaffold, a construction scaffold, is set up and around the ring area, right? What you have is the wrestlers go on top of it. The idea is to basically knock your opponent off the scaffold. I guess you could make the argument, because of the bumps that required in doing so, you could argue that it was kind of a precursor to the Hell in the Cell. So, yeah, imagine being up there, especially if you're somebody who's like not that steady to begin with, or just scared of heights, and you're up there like 15, 20 feet off the ground on that very thin plank of wood of a scaffold, and there's somebody coming for you that's gonna be looking to shove you off of that. You're gonna be taking a very, very high, nasty fall that could get you seriously hurt. So that's something else right there. And that just goes to show you the athletic ability that these men had in order to be able to do something like that. So, anyways, let's continue. Let's continue on. Of course. All right. All right. So, Reformation with Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane, 1987 and 1988. In March 1987, Dennis Condrey suddenly left JCP without giving any notice, leaving Eaton without a partner. Bubba Rogers worked a few dates to fulfill obligations, but Dusty Rhodes made the decision to pick Stan Lane, who was a single stars in Florida at the time. Tom Pritchard was thought about, but never officially suggested. Now, Stan Lane, prior to joining Eaton, of course, did have some successful runs in tag teams. First with Brian St. John in Florida in like 78, 79, 80 that time, and then in the early 80s, like 81 through 83, I believe, he was paired with Steve Kern as the Fabulous Ones under the guidance of the fabulous Jackie Fargo. So basically, pairing Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton here probably to them felt like a very natural fit. So, anyways, getting back to this, Ian and Lane reached the semifinals of the Crockett Cup Tag Team Tournament on April 11, 1987 in Baltimore. On May 16, 1987, the combination of Eaton and Lane won the NWA United States Tag Team titles for the first time. Basically, the United States Tag Team titles were the secondary belts in the tag division, much like the United States Heavyweight title was the secondary title to the World Heavyweight title. So, and we continue on here. Let's see. A title they would win 3 times during their time together. So, a year later, the team was cheered on, despite being heels, as they won the NWA World Tag Team titles from the Horsemen, Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, on September 10th, 1988. So this was probably just before Anderson and yeah, they even say it right there in the parentheses there. So parentheses, Anderson and Blanchard left NWA to go to World Wrestling Federation. Yeah. The Midnight Express's title run only lasted a little over a month and a half before the Road Warriors, in parentheses, who had recently turned heel on Sting, in parentheses, took the gold from them in a brutal match. So it's kind of like some people, I think, may have thought at the time that no, there was no way hell would have to freeze over before the Midnight Express would become faces and the Road Warriors would be heels, albeit the Road Warriors actually started out as heels and eventually became baby faces. So, anyways, feud of the Midnight Expresses. So meanwhile, so that 1988 to 1989. Meanwhile, Condrey eventually signed a contract to wrestle for the AWA, which at the time was recording television in Las Vegas. Condrey was living in Denver, Colorado at the time. He reconnected with former Midnight Express member Randy Rhodes, and the two began teaming as the Midnight Express under the management of Paul E. Dangerously, a.k.a. Paul Heyman. The unit won the AWA World Tag Team Championship in October 1987 after defeating Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee. They then lost the titles to the Midnight Rockers. The Midnight Rockers, who were, of course, that was Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, making their actual initial return, I believe, in December, making their initial return from their initial run in the WWF at the time. In reality, Condrey and AWA owner Vern Gagne were in a dispute over money owed to Condrey, and he, Rose, and Dangerously all left promotion in early 1988 while still being promoted as champions. AWA decided to retroactively declare the Midnight Rockers match in December to be a title change in favor of the latter. So it was one of those phantom title change situations. About a year later, on an episode of World Championship Wrestling, Cornette received an on-air phone call from someone who was claiming to be anonymous. Cornette recognized the man's voice and challenged him to come out and speak his piece to his face. The man turned out to be Paulie Dangerously, and he, Condrey, and Rose came out and attacked Cornette and Lane during a singles match featuring the latter. This began one of the most anticipated feuds in the tag team division, with Eaton and Lane facing off against Condrey and Rose. In other words, the current Midnight Express versus the original Midnight Express. Despite the success the feud had generated early on, the battle between Midnight Express and the original Midnight Express eventually petered off. Cornette contended in a shoot interview that backstage politics and animosity between the original Midnight Express, original Midnights, promotion head Jim Crockett, head booker George Scott, led to the feud being cooled off. And this, again, was probably one of those situations where when the originals came back to Jim Crockett Promotions at the time, Dusty Rhodes was probably still a booker before he left for WWE as well, along with Arn and Tully and all that. So he was probably the one who pushed for the feud. But anyway, the Midnight Express in WCW, 1989 to 1990. Due to various differences over the direction of the Midnight Express, Cornette, Lane, and Eaton also left JCP briefly. A few months after Ted Turner purchased the company, and it was renamed World Championship Wrestling, when the issues were resolved, Cornette and the Midnight Express returned to the promotion in the tournament to determine new World Tag Team Champions. The Midnight Express advanced to the finals, losing to the Freebirds with some assistance from the Samoan SWAT team. They engaged in a feud with the Freebirds and the Samoans until the 1989 Great American Bash, where they teamed up with the Road Warriors and Dr. Death Steve Williams to defeat the Freebirds and the Samoans in a War Games. So by this time, of course, the Midnights were still a face team. Here's where some other interesting things start happening. The Midnight Express soon turned heel as a result of a feud with the Dynamic Dudes, Johnny Ace and Shane Douglas. This is still very early on in their careers. This is probably a period of time that Shane Douglas probably really laments quite a bit. Probably one of the times that he talks about where Ric Flair's influence, I guess, here too. This is of course before Johnny Ace went off to Japan and really became a star over there. Innovating probably one of the move we call the stunner. He actually originated it as the Ace Crusher. And so Jim Cornette duped the dudes into thinking he wanted to be their manager, but then turned on them during a match against the Midnight Express at Clash of Champions number 9 in New York. The dynamic dudes gained a measure of revenge when the Midnight Express laid out an open challenge for any team for $10,000. After dispatching a couple of no-name teams, the Express was challenged by the masked dynamic duo billed from Gotham City, who pinned the Express and unmasked as Ace and Douglas. The feud soon lost steam and was forgotten soon after. I actually do kind of remember some of this because this is around the time I actually started. This is kind of around the time I started watching wrestling. I think this might have even been around the time that I actually started watching NWA. Maybe because I started catching some of the delayed programming on like independent stations like KDOC and all that. But anyways. After returning to their cheating ways, Midnight Express started a feud with up-and-coming team Flying Brian Pillman and Z-Man Tom Zink over the United States Tag Team titles. The Express won the titles from the young team in early 1990, but lost them to the Steiner brothers, Rick and Scott, 3 months later. They were then defeated at Halloween Havoc 1990 by Tommy Rich and Ricky Morton. On October 29th, 1990, the Express showed up to the Worldwide Wrestling TV tapings in Anderson, South Carolina, only to discover they were not on the card for any of the shows. Since they were not told ahead of time, Eaton was unable to take the day off to spend time with his wife and children. Cornette, already frustrated over what he perceived as the burial of Lane Eaton by WCW President Jim Herd, discovered the next day that the Express was booked for 4 matches at the October 30th World Championship Wrestling TV tapings in Atlanta, Georgia, and they were to lose all of them. After confronting Ole Anderson, the booker at the time, over the scheduling, Cornette was told to go home, quote unquote, if he disagreed. Calling Anderson's bluff, Cornette walked out of the room and told Lane he was leaving for good. Lane decided that he was going to quit as well. And after they said goodbye to Eaton, in parentheses, who decided to stay due to his family obligations, on parentheses, both men left and began heading north toward Charlotte, North Carolina. It was not until Anderson came looking for Cornette and Lane that he realized they had quit after questioning Eaton of their whereabouts. So, for the first time in almost a decade, there was no Midnight Express. And that's where we're going to end right there, because I know a lot of people, the next part here talks about Bart Gunn and Bob Holly's stint as the Midnight Express. There are a lot of fans out there who just kind of want to forget that. It's one of those things, WWE did that with the new Midnight Express as well as the new Blackjacks, where, the new Rockers, where they basically take on established names only for the copies to fall way short of the originals. All right, so that's all we got for the main article that we're going to talk about tonight. Hopefully, you guys got got a lot out of that. For the professional wrestling fans out there, hopefully you enjoyed a little trip down memory lane there, remembering back to the heyday of the Midnight Express. Lover boy Dennis Condrey, ravishing Randy Rose, beautiful Bobby Eaton, and sweet Stan Lane. Of course, Paulie Dangerously and Jimmy Cornette. So, James E. Cornette. Alrighty then. So, with all that being said now, let's get caught up on some modern stuff, let's get caught up on what's going down today. What's going down in today's world of professional wrestling. Let's do the wrestling wrap up here. So first off, it was announced yesterday by Triple H that there'd be another WWE Hall of Fame inductee in the Legacy portion of the event. Bad News Brown, aka Bad News Allen, aka Alan Coolidge, will also join Sid Vicious in the Legacy induction of the WWE Hall of Fame, in which he'll be instead of being given a formal presentation, he'll be part of a video package of guys who, of course, Bad News, whether you knew him as Bad News Brown or Brand News Allen. He of course was a mainstay in Stampede Wrestling in the early to mid 80s, as well as Championship Wrestling Florida. Spent some time down there in 86 and 87 before moving on to the WWF for a time. So anyway, so that news out of the way. Now let's talk about what happened on last night's Dynamite. As on last night's AEW Dynamite, coming from the Roy Wilkins Auditorium in St. Paul, Minnesota, with Excalibur, Tony Schiavone, and Taz on commentary. The show, of course, opened up with a match between Kenny Omega and Swerve Strickland, in which Swerve Strickland's number one contendership and Kenny Omega's EVP position were both on the line in this match. The winner would basically kind of a winner takes all in terms of number one contender and EVP. Well, Kenny Omega defeated Swerve Strickland, needing something like 4 or 5 V triggers to finally get Swerve Strickland stunned enough for him to hit the one winged angel on him to get the win. Of course, Kenny Omega would later on that evening call out or come out during, I guess, a segment with MJF to challenge him at Dynasty for the AEW World Title, in which MJF accepted. Then you had, of course, a mixed 6-man tag match between the Death Riders trio of Daniel Garcia, AEW Continental Champion Jon Moxley, and Marina Shafir, with Wheeler Yuta in the corner, to take on the team of Skyflight, Dante and Darius Martin, Zeta Steel, with Christopher Daniels in their corner, in which the Death Riders defeated them. Then Jon Moxley got on the mic after the match and answered Will Ospreay's challenge, I believe, for Dynasty. Now, Dynasty's coming up on April 12th, so we'll probably talk a little bit about that card in a moment here, what's going down thus far. Speedball Mike Bailey defeated Rocky Romero in 2 minutes, 43 seconds. You also had a promo between Cajun Cope, and in which they basically went off on FTR as they look to challenge FTR for the AEW World Tag Titles. Um, Another tag team match, the Dogs duo of Clark Connors and David Finlay defeated the conglomeration duo of Orange Cassidy and Roderick Strong in just over 10 and a half minutes. Tekla successfully retained the AEW Women's World title over Mina Shirakawa, uh, utilizing brass knucks to help her get the advantage. She initially took off her belt to try to use on Mina, only for the ref to get the belt out of her hand. And as he was taking care of that, she pulled out some brass knuckles from let's just say a very discreet place. Let's just say it like that. And basically knocked Mina out and retained the title in just under 11 minutes. And then in the main event of the evening, in a no count out match, Darby Allin defeated Roosh. After the match, of course, the Don Callis family, who had been contracted to try to take Darby Allin out, did so with Mark Davis coming out and attacking Darby Allin, hitting him with a couple of pile drivers. So trying to, basically being contracted by MJF to try to keep Darby Allin far from the title picture. And now we've got all caught up with all the wrestling news. So let's go ahead. So now, with that being said, today being, actually, since it's still a few weeks away, Dynasty is coming up on the Sunday, April 12th, the week before WrestleMania. So we'll just kind of threw myself off a bit here for some reason, but anyways, all right. So with all that being said, let's today being Thursday, March 26th, 2026, let's go ahead and take a look back at this day in each history. So first off, we're going to head back 40 years ago. And on this date, 40 years ago today, back in 1986, probably another one of my favorite all-time animes right here. On this date, back in 1986, Studio Dean's Maison Ikoku, or Ikoku House as it's translated, premiered on Japanese television on this date back in 1986. So 40 years ago today, Maison Ikoku from Studio Dean premiered on Japanese television on this date back in 1986. So now, and we get ready to move on to the next piece in each history. We move ahead to the year 2001. As on this date in the year 2001, WCW would hold its its final Monday Nitro on this date back in 2001, 25 years ago today. They called it the Night of Champions. Was held at the Boardwalk Beach and Resort. It was basically the last ever WCW Nitro ever held. Normally, I go from the main event back, but considering there was significant stuff going on throughout the night here. Um, we'll kind of go over the card real quick. So, in the opening match of the evening, Booker T um, defending the United States in a basically in a champion versus champion match, with Booker T defending the United States Championship and Scott Steiner with Medeja in his corner defending the world title. Booker T would defeat Scott Steiner to become the new WCW World Heavyweight Championship champion. Then in the next match, in a tag team, in a number one contenders three-way match to determine the number one contender and the people who would challenge for the WCW Cruiserweight Tag Team Championships later on that night. Rey Mysterio Jr. and Billy Kidman would defeat Shannon Moore and Evan Courageous and Kazuyoshi and Yang in a three-way tag team match. In a match for the WCW Cruiserweight title, Sugar Shane Helms, would retain over Chavo Guerrero Jr. Then Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo would retain the WCW World Tag Team titles over Mike Awesome and Lance Storm. Sean Stasiak, with Stacy Keibler in his corner, would defeat Bam Bam Bigelow in a minute 25 in the final in a very short match. Then Rey Mysterio Jr. and Billy Kidman would defeat Elix Skipper and Kid Romeo to win the WCW, to become the new WCW Cruiserweight Tag Team Champions, and basically the last ones because the titles did not continue beyond that. And then in the main event, saw Sting defeat Ric Flair. After the match, of course, Sting kind of helped Flair get up and gave each other a congratulatory hug. And then of course they would the program would then mold and would basically go into the simulcast with WWE Monday Night Raw. All right, so now moving on from there. So on this date, 25 years ago, the last ever WCW Monday Nitro took place on this date 25 years ago today. Now moving on to the year 2011, so 15 years ago today, on this date 15 years ago today. Let's see. On this date, 15 years ago today, Vanity Logo Productions' God, the Devil, and Bob would conclude its run on Adult Swim on this date in 2011. So initially it debuted on NBC, was canceled, then brought back in 2010. And this was the final run of God, the Devil, and Bob, which aired on this date back in 2011, 15 years ago. And then now, and finally, moving ahead to the year 2014, is on this date in the year 2014, 12 years ago, rather. Oh, I said 11. Yeah. On this date, 12 years ago, the fifth issue of Alex and Ada went on sale on newsstands from Image Comics. So for $2.99 with 32 pages. Based on let's see, written I guess by Jonathan Luna and with I guess art by Sarah Wagner. based on what I can tell, based on the picture, and I saw one of the other covers as well when I was looking this book up. If I had to guess, this was a comic about marriage, to a certain extent, or at least some kind of relationship here. Well, marriage, because I guess on the first issue had the two main characters basically at a wedding, in their wedding. So, hey, Natsuri, thanks for dropping in there. As we're just about to wrap up the show here. Um, but anyways, that's all I've got for you guys tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. I know I started a little late tonight. Sometimes you get caught up on things and all that. But with all that being said, I thank everybody for being here. And I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Bye.